Take us home, Sammy.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. I'm your host, Matt, and today we have with us one of our favorite guests ever in the history of the world, Mike Lentz. How you doing, Mike? No, I'm just kidding. Mike is one of our favorite Peanut Gallery members, though, but today our guest is Codie Eash. Hello, Codie.
Hello. Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming back. And thank you for sending that lecture the other day about Leon Douglas.
Oh, wasn't that awesome?
Yeah, it was awesome. And you said, you might have gotten a little long-winded there. I, so far, haven't found any long-windedness.
All right.
Yeah, it was really good, and I'm hearing a lot of good things from people. They loved it.
Good.
And I think Mike actually, didn't you put it on Instagram and said it was like some pleasant surprise or something, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so keep throwing those my way.
Will do.
If you get bored and you just want to like record something, even if it's something you did years ago, but you just want it out there for posterity, record it and send it to me, and I will put it up.
Sure.
I won't even listen to it ahead of time. I just listen to the beginning and the end to make sure I'm giving my props, and then that's and that's it.
Oh my.
No, I don't really.
Yeah, that one was one that a couple years ago I gave. It was I think 200th anniversary of Douglas's birth, 2018, and I figured, well, yeah, we're at the anniversary here of when he came to Gettysburg, so let's do this one.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And it was good. People are really liking it. But today we're talking about John Buford. Everybody loves John Buford, I think, initially because of Sam Elliott and the way he portrayed him. But I think that is just a gateway drug into learning about the man. And when you do and you read about him, you find out that, I don't know, maybe Sam Elliott wasn't really that much Hollywood, and it was pretty close to the way the guy really was. What I find interesting is when he died, Buford, he was 37. And that's younger than me. I mean, a lot of these guys that died in the war were younger than me because the young men fight wars, but... so it's a little, Elliot, I think, was a little older than 37 at the time that they did the movie, but still, it's the character of Buford. I think he does a great job portraying. So today we're talking about his death and his funeral and memory and all of that stuff, right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, then why don't you get us started there? How and when did he die?
Sure. So John Buford, for those unaware, just kind of a brief background biography up to the time of Gettysburg and then his death. Born March 4th, 1826 in Woodford County, Kentucky. A couple of kind of biographical background connections to Lincoln of sorts. He's born about 85 miles northeast of Hardin County, where Lincoln was born. And then Lincoln, of course, most famous for having been connected to the state of Illinois, which is where Buford is going to move at a very young age as a child to Illinois, and his roots are there. He'll go for a year of college, eventually to West Point, graduates 1848 in the middle of his class. Is going to receive a commission as a second lieutenant in the 1st Dragoon Regiment, which is very formative in his understanding of how cavalry works and how he'll fight dismounted at Gettysburg and elsewhere. Mm-hmm. This is kind of the roots are there for the 2 decades or so before. And at the outbreak of the Civil War, he's a captain in the 2nd Dragoons, and ultimately he'll be a major assistant inspector general of the defenses of Washington in the fall of 1861, and then in 1862 receives his final really lifetime promotion, battlefield promotion to Brigadier General of Volunteers. This is under the command of John Pope in the Army of Virginia at the time of the Second Battle of Bull Run.
Let me just stop you right there.
Yeah.
For the sake of people who are not well-versed in all these military titles and ranks and things, what is an inspector general?
That's actually, I don't exactly know, but it's...
We'll cut this part out.
My understanding is in like a defense position like of Washington, where it's not an active battleground, but it's this series of fortifications. This is a big good Steve Fan question. It's this series of fortifications. You're kind of overseeing the happenings at a stagnant military installation like that. And so I think that oftentimes you'll see folks with the title of Inspector General, it's kind of in the middle of their passage from a desk job to back to the
the
battlefield,
field.
to the field. And a lot of wounded soldiers, like Alexander Hayes, for example, he's wounded at 2nd Manassas. And before he comes back to the battlefield to be with the Army of the Potomac in 1863, he's in this similar kind of role in the defenses of Washington. So as new regiments are being mustered into service, and when you look at late 62, this would be a lot of those 9-month kind of emergency units around the time of the Maryland campaign. Their first place they're going is to the national capital. And I think that Buford is in kind of a supervisory capacity, is my understanding of how that would work.
Like kind of just you're inspecting and making sure that things are proper or done properly and things like that.
So
right?
It's not a glorious position because you're probably not going to lead troops in battle.
And don't be fooled by the word general being in there because you're not a general per se.
Exactly. He has the rank of major, so he's less than a colonel at that point in time. So, yeah.
You're on, Eric. Go ahead.
Oh, nice. What you guys are talking about, the Inspector General is basically there to ensure that policies, general orders, regulations are being followed by the subordinate commanders.
Okay, got it.
Making sure that your ordnance returns and your quartermaster returns and your personnel returns are all being filed correctly and on time and all that kind of stuff. There's like the Secretary General.
Mm-hmm. So there would be inspector generals. There would be someone would be an inspector general at every level, though, right? Like, so in other words, like a guy like Buford might be going from the high command in D.C. to the defenses of D.C., but the commander of the defense that he's, whichever fort he's at or whatever it may be, he would have his own inspector general that makes sure that everybody below him is going all right? Okay.
It starts at like the brigade level and it goes all the way up to the army level.
Okay.
Kind of like the adjutant general.
Yes.
Same deal.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay, good. So now that we got that little aside there, continue now with his. Where did we leave off? Where did I interrupt you? Inspector General.
Yeah. So and then he's going to be he gets the cavalry brigade command, and really kind of his first place, and I would say aside from Gettysburg, the place that maybe he's most well known as far as a major battle of the Civil War is the Second Battle of Bull Run, Second Battle of Manassas. This is late August 1862 for a couple of reasons significant for Buford's sake. One is that he really kind of has this observatory capacity where he notices that James Longstreet's Confederate Corps is present, and they're moving across the Union front. And he's going to alert Irwin McDowell. Folks are familiar with the First Battle of Bull Run in overall command there. Now, a little more than a year later, McDowell commands the Third Corps, part of the Army of Virginia, eventually absorbed into the Army of the Potomac. And Buford alerts McDowell, but McDowell fails to pass along this intelligence that Confederate troops are moving across the front. And so this is one of those moments where Buford does something kind of above and beyond, and nobody recognizes it. And that's going to be a pretty common trend, especially as we talk about his Gettysburg legacy. And then the next day, August 30th, his men are engaged in an effort to block the 5th Virginia Cavalry from crossing over Lewis Ford, which was a crossing over the Bull Run Creek. And there's this brief 10-minute engagement, but Buford does receive a wound to the knee by a spent bullet. And so he's out of service for a little while, but come early 1863, new commander of the Army of the Potomac is Major General Joseph Hooker, and Buford now is going to start moving up through the ranks, first as the commander of the Reserve Brigade of the Cavalry Corps. Cavalry Corps is new at this point in time. The Army is being reorganized. Cavalry has moved away from being kind of under the direct command of Infantry Corps, and Buford will soon rise to the command of a division. And maybe the most famous part of his division is that it does include a brigade of United States regular cavalry. So not just volunteer cavalry from states, but these are the cream of the crop in terms of United States cavalrymen. This is Wesley Merritt's brigade, for those familiar with the Gettysburg campaign, not initially here with Buford's other two brigades on July 1st. April and May 1863, he's engaged in Brigadier General George Stoneman's cavalry expedition leading up to and covering the Battle of Chancellorsville, Battle of Brandy Station, June 9th, 1863. Buford performs well there, gets a knoll named after him. You can still visit Buford's Knoll today, right next to a small airport, but the land preserved by the American Battlefield Trust. And then that leads us up to the Battle of Gettysburg. And as we talk about his memory here, we'll talk more, I'm sure, about what he does at Gettysburg. And many folks are generally familiar, I'm sure, with the role that he plays June 30th and July 1st. But as all this is happening, Buford is starting to develop symptoms of typhoid fever, and one of them appears to be rheumatoid arthritis. And I think it's John Gibbon, who is division commander in the 2nd Corps here at Gettysburg, who makes mention that on July 2nd, 1863, after Buford's men have pulled back from the western and northern sides of town, Buford has made his stand early morning July 1st, and for the better part of 3 hours, they hold off Confederates of nearly 4 times their number. And after July 1st, Buford's men are on Cemetery Ridge and eventually are moved out toward essentially the Peach Orchard area along the Emmitsburg Road. And Gibbon says that at a distance, he noticed that Buford needed help on and off of his horse, that he seems to be ailing in health even at that point in time.
Interesting.
And as the Gettysburg campaign continues and Lee's army is being pursued through Maryland and ultimately to the crossing at Williamsport and the engagement of Falling Water, so often there's this idea, of course, and it's a big Gettysburg controversy, of Meade doesn't pursue. But the arm of the Army of the Potomac that does pursue is cavalry, including Buford's division. And they'll fight in a series of smaller engagements at places near Boonesboro and Funkstown, locations that are not terribly far from the South Mountain battlefield of 1862 or the battlefield of Antietam. And all through this time, Buford it's apparent to those around him that he's beginning to ail in health even more. And so ultimately he will be kind of forced against his own wishes in some degree in November 1863 to go to Washington. He'll reportedly go to the home of George Stoneman, former cavalry commander of the Army of the Potomac, good friend of Buford's, and it's there that he'll really fall into the illest of health possible, and on December 16th, 1863, he will die just a couple of blocks from the White House.
Now, you said his symptoms started when?
Probably sometime in the summer. Yeah, it seems like the exhaustion of the Gettysburg campaign, pursuing the Confederate Army northward, fighting a series of relatively low casualty engagements when we look at cavalry battles, but just the exhaustion of moving over broad swaths of land in a really quick time. And when you think about the sheer number of miles that are ridden by Buford's cavalry, especially at this late stage of the Gettysburg campaign as it's gearing up for the battle, and that's when everything seems to kind of go south for him initially, is when these symptoms that are related potentially to his typhoid or typhus are starting to be noticed by those around him. Yeah,
and the for the benefit of the audience wondering what those symptoms would be, I'll give you this little blurb here. So typhoid, typhus, typhoid fever, same thing. It's a bacterial infection, first of all, due to a specific type of salmonella. And the symptoms vary from mild to severe and usually begin 6 to 30 days after exposure. There's a gradual onset of high fever over several days. This is commonly accompanied by weakness, abdominal pain, constipation, headaches, and mild vomiting. Some people develop a skin rash with rose-colored spots, and in severe cases, people become confused. Without treatment, symptoms may last weeks or months. Diarrhea is uncommon. Other people may carry the bacterium without being affected, but they are still able to spread the disease to others. It is the fever is a type of enteric fever, which I don't know what that is. Let's see what that is. It has to do with the gastroenterology. It's your gut. It has to do with your gut, along with a paratyphoid fever. So it sounds pretty miserable, and the reason I wanted to go through that was because now just imagine having these symptoms and being in a saddle out in the field all day for weeks or months or whatever, and it would be pretty hard to heal. You have something there, Mike?
Yeah, I read somewhere that he was considered for a cavalry command in the Army of the Cumberland, and it was this ill health in this period that kind of derailed those particular plans. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, Buford, you oftentimes hear that if he had lived longer than he did, there's a really good chance, as the Army of the Potomac is being organized even in the spring of 1864, he'll probably get command of it. And we have to wonder how different would that have looked.
Command of the Army. This episode is now available over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. Please help support the show and become a patron today.